Hello there, and welcome to Life on Earth.
Hello.
As if we weren't all living life on Earth. This is Life on Earth. And we are here to talk about life on Earth. We're here to talk about applying Ayn Rand's philosophy to life.
We are life forms with a specific nature, in fact.
Ayn Rand gave a speech in 1976 called Philosophy Who Needs It? Of course, the title essay also for the book that was released afterwards. And she talked about philosophy without talking about her philosophy until the very end. And she said, the name of my philosophy is Objectivism, but informally I call it a philosophy for living on Earth. And the point of this show is for folks studying her philosophy, it's about a lot more than just politics and arguing on the internet and winning debates, although it's really good for winning debates. We are here to talk about life on Earth. And I've been talking about life on Earth on the internets, the social networks, the Twitter and the Facebook and the stuff those young kids use. And the topic of benevolence came up. Well, benevolence was the topic of the very first episode, or at least the number one episode number one of the show we started last year, 5 Minutes with Robert Nasir. Mm-hmm. So I had to jump in on that, said a few things, and right away I got pushback, skepticism. So we need to talk. You, me, Amy, we need to talk about this.
Let's all get together, hold hands, and talk.
We need to talk about benevolence. Why? For fun and profit, of course, and also to avoid the potential pitfalls. For example, the so-called benevolence trap that we'll talk about. In short, the manner in which we approach benevolence, the way that we choose to exercise goodwill, the manner in which we present ourselves to the world, the way in which we master our own countenance, shapes every other aspect of our lives here on Earth. So having established that, let me quickly define my terms. So I went to the Oxford University Press, which states benevolence is the quality of being kind, helpful, and generous. Well, okay, not quite what I was looking for. So we went to Merriam-Webster as well. Benevolence, goodwill, sounds more like it. A disposition to do good. And this was fun on Merriam-Webster. They also said to be benevolent, it helps to have money, but it's not necessary. Kind assistance of a non-financial sort can be benevolent. This I saw across several dictionaries, several definitions, and over several episodes that we did. This notion that benevolence implies wealth, implies some degree of financial status. And I kind of love that because we very much encourage financial success. When we talk about life on Earth on this show, we are encouraging people to apply this philosophy, to get crazy rich, or at least successful, whether money is your goal or not. And in order to have a big impact on the culture, it's not about arguing ideas, it's about establishing credibility. So I love the idea that benevolence implies money, implies that ability to have an impact, to help people, but not altruistically. Let's talk about that. How does this disposition to do good, this disposition or this chosen default way of being, how does that relate to Ayn Rand and Objectivism's Benevolent Universe premise?
I bet you have some answers for this, Robert.
Well, it relates in much the same way that we relate, but draw a crucial distinction between the metaphysical and the man-made.
There is a distinction between the metaphysical and the man-made, as a matter of fact.
When people think of benevolence and objectivism, they right away go to the benevolent universe premise. And I'm going to do that too.
Are you?
Just to get us started.
Okay.
I'm going to quote Leonard Peikoff from the Philosophy of Objectivism Lecture Series number 8. Although accidents and failures are possible, they are not, according to objectivism, the essence of human life. On the contrary, the achievement of values is the norm. Speaking now for the moral man, moral by the objectivist definition, success and happiness are the metaphysically to be expected. In other words, objectivism rejects the view that human fulfillment is impossible, that man is doomed to misery, that the universe is malevolent. We advocate the benevolent universe premise. The benevolent universe does not mean that the universe feels kindly to man or that it is out to help him achieve his goals. No, the universe is neutral. It simply is. It is indifferent to you. You must care about and adapt to it, not the other way around. But reality is benevolent in the sense that if you do adapt to it, if you do think, value, act rationally, then you can, and barring accidents, you will achieve your values. You will, because those values are based on reality. He quotes Ayn Rand a little later. We do not think tragedy is our natural state. We do not live in chronic dread of disaster. We do not expect disaster until we have specific reason to expect it. And when we encounter it, we are free to fight it. It is not happiness, but suffering that we consider unnatural. It is not success, but calamity that we regard as the abnormal exception in human life. He phrases that a little bit differently in Opar from the original lecture. Worth reading both of them. And I posted on my social networks show notes with links to that. You should check that out. The benevolent universe premise. Ayn Rand says in The New Left, the Anti-Industrial Revolution, there is a fundamental conviction that some people never acquire, some hold only in their youth, and a few hold to the end of their days, the conviction that ideas matter. That ideas matter means that knowledge matters, that truth matters, that one's mind matters. Its consequence is the inability to believe in the power or the triumph of evil. No matter what corruption one observes in one's immediate background, one is unable to accept it as normal, permanent, or metaphysically right. One feels this injustice or terror or falsehood or frustration or pain or agony is the exception in life, not the rule. One feels certain that somewhere on earth, even if not anywhere in one's surroundings or within one's reach, a proper human way of life is possible to human beings, and justice matters. Again, from her article, The Inexplicable Personal Alchemy in the New Left, the Anti-Industrial Revolution. It's been republished as Return of the Primitive. Same book, a little extra stuff added in by Peter Schwartz.
Well, we have a super chat question from Marilyn.
Excellent. Marilyn is just the best. What's she asked?
She says, I didn't know there was a benevolence trap.
There is a benevolence trap.
Could you please explain this?
It was discussed, and we'll get into that. It was discussed by Tara Smith and Betsy Speicher were guests on the host Protos Marinakis' show, just called Protos. Links to that are going to be in the show notes. I've already posted them on my Facebook thread if you're curious about that. The interesting thing about these shows from Protos, there are 3 of them that I've actually posted links to, is that they're really old. Like everybody was young when they did this. And Protos did all of his shows using real media. So unless you have Real Player installed on your computer, you can't actually access those shows that I linked to. So I have downloaded them, converted them into MP3 files, uploaded them to my own website, link in the show notes. You can listen to all 3 of them.
Robert's just amazing, isn't he? Huh?
The Benevolence Trap, though, relates to that conversation I mentioned on the social networks. When the topic of benevolence came up and I said, oh, goody, and one of my favorite things, but other people said, benevolence, this is objectivism. In order to be just, when you encounter people, they should be a 0 to you. You should not assume they're good.
You should assume they're just 0.
And
Marilyn
that's
says,
so wrong in so many ways. But the benevolence trap.
Yeah.
People think if you extend goodwill, if you extend kindness in advance of knowing that somebody is virtuous, you're being altruistic. The altruists feed on this. They love this. The people who want you to sacrifice will count on your benevolence. They will use that against you. Even before applying the guilt, they will simply suck off of your generosity, your kindness, your goodwill, your good intent. They will use that against you in argumentation, in logic, and they will use that against you in material resources here on earth. And that is the benevolence trap, is your benevolence can be used against you.
Mm.
Now, my answer to that, to the people who raised those objections, is, come on, we're smarter than that. And we're objectivists, we're clear on our principles, we don't sacrifice. I swear by my life and my love of it, I will never live for the sake of another man, nor ask another man to live for mine. But it is a very real trap, and even people who are relatively self-aware like me can fall into it. It is something that one has to be wary of. So
Yes.
I don't mean to criticize the people online who said, benevolence, oh, you got to watch out for that.
Yeah, Marilyn does say, many people think benevolence and objectivism are mutually exclusive.
Yes, and that they could not possibly be more wrong. Now, the reason I mentioned the metaphysical and the man-made is precisely that the universe's benevolence is a judgment of a simple fact, that the universe, to use Leonard Peikoff's newer phraseology from Opar, the universe is auspicious to human life.
I love that phrase.
Yes.
I use it all the time.
I was going to quote the passage from Opar instead of the earlier one, but I like his other phraseology choices on this one. But yes, in the later book, auspicious to human life is Leonard Peikoff's official definition of benevolence in this context. Whereas people being benevolent, that's man-made, not metaphysical. In other words, people do have to be judged. But the error that people make when they say, well, I can't just assume people are good because they have free will. The error that people make is they fail to notice that, yes, but most people do choose to be decent people.
They do?
You don't not judge them. In fact, by judging them, you see the benevolence of the world. We'll talk about that more. But again, legitimate objections, the general benevolence of mankind, the deep love and devotion and admiration that people have for one another is different in your inner circle. It's different with your friends. It's different with your family. And they're not just values of different magnitude. They are of a different kind. I don't mean to conflate goodwill with the love we have for our friends and our family and our children and our romantic partners, but it takes nothing away from goodwill. It takes nothing away from benevolence to say, yes, my family is more important to me than my barista and the cashier down at the local department store, than my coworkers. That is valid, that is right to do. And yet it remains the case that strangers are a value.
Are they?
My barista is a value. The checkout gal at the local department store is a value.
I guess they are strangers, aren't they?
They're perfect strangers.
Yeah.
The waitress at the restaurant is a perfect stranger. And yet,
they wish me a good day.
Not only do I assume good intent on their part, I have every evidence of it.
Right.
Every day, all day, everywhere I go, I encounter good people. And the evidence that they're good people isn't just anecdotal, oh, I don't see many bad people because I don't go to too many bad places. The evidence is also that we're alive, they're alive. And values are not automatic, something we understand in objectivism. People need to be producing these values. Now, some people can live as parasites, some people can be bums, but you don't get the kind of technological, to hell with technology, just think of the abundance that we have. You don't get this kind of society unless people are out there making it happen. It's
you know, one thing I would like to write or read from somebody else is more of an in-depth explanation about, you know, how the world, this benevolent universe, is auspicious to human life, and how that metaphysical fact plays into a person's sense of benevolence and goodwill towards other people.
Well, I should write that book. Life is a positive. It's not a value in the sense of being chosen, but it is the ultimate value. It's something, that's why I always say objectivists need to take over the concept of the sanctity of life.
Yes.
Life is a value. You were gifted a life. There is no higher value on earth. And yet, you didn't do anything to be born. It's your responsibility to maintain it. All of your virtue is required to maintain it. But the point is that the default is not zero and never is in life. You take people like Jordan Peterson who think that life on balance is suffering. He couldn't be more wrong. And the reason is people are, oh yeah, lobsters, people are alive. And the fact that people are alive means that they've produced more than they've consumed. They've done more good than they've done evil. Again, not everybody. There are exceptions. There are parasites. There are lousy people out there. But you can't go to New York City or here in Motown, any large city or any small city. You can't look around this world unless you go to, real slums, ghetto areas, look around and say, people destroy more than they produce. People consume more than they make.
Right.
People are rotten. You can't look at the state of the world and believe that.
Yeah.
And it's not to deny free will. There are 1,000 pressures on you helping you along in this. Because there are countries where the culture is shot. People think we're bad here in America because of the culture war, and some of that is terrible. Read Yeonmi Park's book, from Escaping from North Korea. And she doesn't just talk about North Korea, she talks about China. She even talks about South Korea and what happens to the refugees there, the stuff they go through. The point is, things aren't perfect, but they could be 1,000 times worse, and people aren't perfect, but they could be 1,000 times worse. And getting back to benevolence, I'm going to quote Adam Smith. Because Adam Smith said, and everybody knows this line from Adam Smith, even those of us who haven't finished reading our Adam Smith books know this line.
Yes.
It is not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, or the baker that we expect our dinner, but from their regard to their own self-interest. We address ourselves not to their humanity, but to their self-love, and never talk to them of our own necessities, but of their advantages. And Adam Smith is exactly right. It is not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, or the baker that we expect our dinner, but from their regard for their own self-interest. Here's the only problem with that. There is no contradiction between the benevolence of the butcher and his self-interest. And Adam Smith might not have fully understood that, or maybe he's just stating it in a way that implies a contradiction. But we as objectivists, we know that. We know that it is the butcher, the baker, the brewer's self-interest that is behind his benevolence. It's why when you go to a restaurant, when you go to even a store, a coffee shop, it's why customer service matters.
Right.
It's fun to talk about this with Felix Mueller. If you don't know him, any objectivist on Facebook should be friends with this guy. Wicked smart, came to the United States from Germany.
Yeah.
After being in China for a year or two. And he talks about cultural things, and he talks about how in Germany, people are more serious. In fact, they think that the way that we smile at each other in the United States is overblown.
Or I'm selling you something.
I'm selling you something. It's cringeworthy or totally fake. They're not used to that. They're not used to people smiling and saying hello. Differences in culture. And I love it because he's slowly becoming more and more American. He's falling into more and more of these American ideas, even though he can still see them as an outsider and criticize them in interesting ways. And I love that because it goes to show you that although it's cultural and we feel these pressures from those around us, we have different norms. At the same time, if it's cultural, it's also chosen. It's not genetic. It's not built in. It's not just something you are because you're a human being. And I love it.
It's the nature of values.
And that takes me to Ted Lasso and Emily in Paris. Because if you haven't yet watched the Apple TV series Ted Lasso or the Netflix series Emily in Paris, you need to get to that. You need to make that happen. One of my favorite shows on the Ayn Rand Center UK's channel is a show called Flirting with Reason with Nikos and Maria. It's a great show because it talks about romance in modern times. And you get kind of both sides of the equation. You get the basics of romance, and these are objectivists. They're talking very rationally and very sweetly about romance and very, very common sensibly. But at the same time, they also talk about ghosting and incels and the game and all of these modern contrivances that have a lot of people convinced romance is dead. The idea of marriage is over.
Except that a lot of that's been around forever.
It's been around forever. God,
Scoring.
watch the movie Grease from the 70s.
Yeah.
as if one night stands are a new thing. Well, they are a new thing because they have a different name now.
Yeah, it's called a
They're
hookup.
hookups. Yeah.
Get off my lawn.
Get off my lawn.
Call it a one night stand.
Yeah, we used to call those one night stands. Everything that the kids think is new now is au courant, however you pronounce that in French.
Au courant.
It's
Probably.
everything I say in French is wrong, but Amy knows French, so she's here to correct me.
Okay.
Everything old is new again, and vice versa. But one of the things I love about that show is, I just lost my train of thought.
You like everything about it.
I do like everything about it.
Oh, while you're trying to remember, I just want to take a moment to thank Marilyn. She has bequested us 2 super chats of $2 each.
Another super chat. Excellent.
Yes.
Thank you for the super chat. I should take a moment, since I mentioned the Ayn Rand Center UK. This show, Life on Earth, is produced under the auspices. I actually have a producer. There is a producer out there watching what we're doing right now. Started the show. He's going to end the show. There's all this stuff I do with my own podcast to make that happen. No, he's doing it all. This show is produced under the auspices of the Ayn Rand Center UK. And you can support the Ayn Rand Center UK in 2 different ways that I will tell you about right now as soon as I find my little cheat sheet here. A, you can ask us a question using the super chat.
And
or
we'll answer it.
And we will answer it. Or you can just put some money in there. Don't ask a question. Just say,
right.
Oh, give him $5 and put it in the super chat.
She did both.
Yeah. The other thing you can do,
Mm-hmm.
the other thing you can do is sign up to be a member of the Ayn Rand Center UK.
Yes.
Link to that is in my show notes, posted on my social networks.
Yes, it's only £10 a month, right?
There's 4 different membership levels. The basic silver level, which gets you all sorts of perks, it's really cool, is £10 a month, roughly $15 US.
Yes.
And so, for example, just before this show, they just wrapped up today's episode of the weekly communications boot camp. And you think, well, I can already communicate pretty good. Why would I go to a communications boot camp? And the answer is it's being taught by Don Watkins, co-author with Yaron Brook of several books, outstanding communicator, and he does a great job with this. You don't have to pay for that. If you're an Ayn Rand Center UK member, you're in. You're part of that. It's so cool. Bunch of other stuff too. In fact, it's fun. They just opened a new store with merch that you can buy. And some of it's pretty funny, but it's not open to the public. You got to join before you can find that link. It'll be opening up eventually. But yeah, join this thing. It's great fun. And you're in on all these extra study groups. They're talking about the early Ayn Rand. I can't resist that. Anything to do with the early Ayn Rand is irresistible to me. But back to benevolence.
Yeah, so actually, do you want to answer that or a new super chat question?
New super chat. What do we got?
We have, does it follow that some modern Christians may still even pay lip service to altruism, but are actually more benevolent than altruistic in practice?
The short answer is yes, of course. In fact, I have a friend of mine who was very pro-Christian in the sense that, yes.
Well, he's an Ayn Rand fan.
He's an Ayn Rand fan. And so I get to hear on a regular basis how Christians are better than everybody else, even some objectivists, and drives me crazy. But there's a kernel of truth to that. Yes, some of the best people are religious. Some of my favorite people in the world are still religious. So it's complicated that they retain that benevolence and do it in a relatively non-self-sacrificial way, and in exactly the kinds of ways that I would advocate. So the short answer to the question is, does it follow that some modern Christians may still even pay lip service to altruism, but are actually more benevolent than altruistic? Yes. Wow. And that was a $5 question with a 1-word answer. Although I did kind of go on about it. But yes, That is absolutely true. And both Leonard Peikoff and Ayn Rand have observed that objectivism does not have a monopoly on virtue.
Mm-hmm.
I think we do have a monopoly on consistent virtue.
And rational virtue.
On fully understanding
based.
Virtue.
Yes.
But yes.
Fully understood.
Yes, Scott, that is absolutely a thing that happens. As I'm sure you've observed, that is absolutely a thing that happens.
And thank you, Marilyn, for the $1.49 super chat. Thank you.
Yes.
You are the best. And she sends us a little rose icon. It's so sweet.
Love it. So I mentioned that when we talk about objectivism, when we talk about Ayn Rand, and then we talk about benevolence, people immediately go to the benevolent universe premise. Fortunately, I had a sneaky asset that a lot of people don't have. Way back when, back in the 1900s or maybe the early 2000s,
last century,
when I was young, I purchased a copy of the Ayn Rand research CD.
Yes.
So it's easier for me than the average person to look up how many times did Ayn Rand use the concept of benevolence in her writing, and the short answer is she used it quite a bit. So I couldn't resist pulling out a few quotes just to make that point. One of the best and also most heartbreaking columns she wrote was a column for the Los Angeles Times that she reprinted in the Ayn Rand column. Through your most grievous fault. People who know that piece will know that's her essay about Marilyn Monroe. I'm just going to quote one paragraph here. Marilyn Monroe on the screen was an image of pure, innocent, childlike joy in living. She projected the sense of a person born and reared in some radiant utopia, untouched by suffering, unable to conceive of ugliness or evil, facing life with the confidence, the benevolence, and the joyous self-flaunting of a child or a kitten who is happy to display its own attractiveness as the best gift it can offer the world, and who expects to be admired for it, not hurt.
Powerful stuff there. Thank you, Ms. Rand.
That sense of benevolence, and again, Ayn Rand, benevolence to me is all over this philosophy, not in the metaphysical sense of the benevolent universe premise, but also in the fact that values are primary. We are, as the Corridors would note, we are not here to not die. We are here to live. Living is more than just not dying. And your interactions with people should be more than just, oh, there's a person there, can I get what I need from him? I love people. To quote Ruth Gordon in the great film Harold and Maude, I love people. They're my species. I don't know, is that racist? They're my race.
It's one human race.
People are well, I've said it before, I'll say it again. People are the second highest value in my life. This should be true for all of you. There's just nothing going that's better than a human being. Yes, we have to be selective. Yes, we have to be careful who we put in our lives, not just because you have to watch out for the bad ones, but frankly, we don't have enough hours in a day to capitalize on all of the value that people can provide us.
I'd like to, do I have a second to talk, do you think? I don't know, what do you think?
Go ahead.
I'm using up seconds. So I have some integrations here. I just made, you're talking about the benevolence trap, and you're talking about,
yes.
Then we had a good question from Scott with regard to Christians and how they are not so much, they kind of cheat on their morality of altruism. And of course you have to, otherwise you're going to sacrifice yourself. You're going to be miserable and you're going to die. So literally, but we're talking about the benevolence trap. And actually that is one of the ways that unfortunately a lot of people, of the Christian persuasion or religious persuasion, or people who are not familiar with Ayn Rand's wonderful structure of morality, that they basically use guilt to get people to do things that are destructive or hurtful or sacrificial to them. So I think in the chat, Jennifer, our good friend Jennifer, she mentioned, the idea of people being pushed into relationships that I don't want to have, well, she's your mother. Well, he's your brother. he's the only brother you have, and so you should have a relationship with him, even though he's, whatever, some horrible person. The duty ethic.
Yeah, there's nothing benevolent about altruism, and there's nothing benevolent about duty.
Yes. So you do have to be pretty careful. When I think of Christians being selfish and self-interested and actually doing good for themselves, I think to myself, well, the fact of the matter is that we have a relative level of freedom in which that we can actually provide for ourselves and enrich ourselves and flourish and basically live based on our own identity as human beings. And with that, so in other words, we're kind of all living under the same sky in that sense. And with that, you're going to have people who are making the right choices, despite, the morals that come out of Christianity. So that is my answer to that, Scott.
And you've got to watch out for that stuff. People, again, benevolence trap, people will take advantage of that. Not most people. And that's kind of important too. We keep returning to the idea that if it was true that most people were rotten, society would not have survived, much less achieved the kind of magnificence that surrounds us. I think of Leonard Peikoff on the first duty of justice. Leonard Peikoff wrote, "So it is important to tell Plato that he is wrong, but it is more important that Aristotle hears somebody recognizes that he is right. It is important that James Taggart not get away with the fraud that he runs Taggart Transcontinental, but it is more important that Reardon finds someone who can understand what he is achieving. The first duty of justice is to acknowledge and defend the good. Objectivism is not about fighting evil.
Mm-hmm.
It's important. It's an important thing to do. And there's no better philosophy for doing that.
Right.
The reason the show is called Life on Earth is because you're not here to not die. You're here to live. The reason why we like people is because people are an extraordinary value. Benevolence is not a primary virtue. And this is to answer some of the commenters, both on the social networks and on the chat. One commenter said, people use benevolence as a fix for their vices. They are very benevolent as a way of compensating for their moral failures. So I think it's important to say, no, benevolence is not a fix. It's not a primary virtue. It's not rationality or honesty or integrity. Actually, it's related to integrity.
Yes, it is.
It's a part of being who you are, of living up to what you believe. And as I said, it's only tangentially related to the benevolent universe premise, in that sense that the universe is only benevolent in ways that people are not. And this is why benevolence matters. The benevolence of the universe simply is. Its reliability is an extension of causality. But as people, we can choose to project goodwill and positive intent and civility and kindness and generosity and good manners. Or people can choose to be difficult, unpleasant, suspicious, rude, cold, callous.
Yeah.
That's why I refer to benevolence as a default. You choose in advance what your default perspective on people is. It's like your waitress at the restaurant. She doesn't walk up to you with a blank face, tell me your order. No, the default is something positive. And that's not altruistic. It's not a sacrifice to extend more than zero.
Yes.
That's simple benevolence. It's manners. It's goodwill. It's good intent. And that is as it should be. The more of that in your life, the better. It's fun. There was a conference description from John Wass. John Wass is an amazing artist.
Yes.
Last name W-O-S.
You should check him out. Yep.
And from the description, it says, optimism is fuel for the soul. It can even be medicine for the soul, and one of the best ways to achieve and maintain it is by consuming or creating romantic art. Few know this as well as artist John Wass. They say, in this session, Wass shares his story, shows his artwork, and discusses the philosophic and aesthetic principles that helped him carve a successful career and a fulfilling life from an inauspicious start. What was his inauspicious start? Born with a genetic bone disorder known as osteogenesis imperfecta, Wass began drawing and painting as a child, and his art often reflected the futility he felt due to his condition. In time, though, he discovered objectivism along with romantic art, and he soon realized their power to transform his life. Now, if you think life is too hard and people kind of suck, and why should I be benevolent? Go to cordair.com, CORDAIR.com. Look at the Quent Cordair Fine Art Gallery. Look up art by John Wass. This heroic man confined to a wheelchair who's overcome every obstacle and creates this amazing artwork. You know, Aristotle said in the Ethics, if activities are, as we said, what gives life its character, your life's character is based on the things you actually do. No happy man can become miserable, for he will never do the acts that are hateful and mean. For the man who is truly good and wise, we think, bears all the chances life becomingly and always makes the best of circumstances. And as a good general makes the best military use of the army at his command, and a good shoemaker makes the best shoes out of the hides that are given him, so with all other craftsmen. I think Aristotle's overstating it a little bit, but I love the idea. If activities are, as we said, what gives life its character, no happy man can become miserable, for he will never do the acts that are hateful and mean. Well, I think that's something to try to live up to.
Yeah, that is the kind of thing that integrates the benevolent universe premise with goodwill as chosen by human beings.
Yes.
And the power of productivity or productiveness and the power of your purpose and your work and actually engaging with reality and becoming a happy person for it, and also seeing the best in other people as a way to make yourself happy and to pursue values.
Yes.
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 We're here to live. We're here to live. We're here to love. We're here to dance. We're here to sing. We're here to romance. We're here to produce. We're here to create. We are here to achieve positive values. And by we, I mean every decent person out there, including all those people I meet every time I go out, whether it's in the office, the workplace, or at the department stores, or the restaurants, or the shops, or the vendors, or just driving down the street. You realize that as you're driving down the street, 2-lane road, traffic in both directions, and somehow the people on the other side of the street stay on their side of the street.
Oh, you mean they're paying attention while they're driving?
They're paying attention.
Oh.
And you're trusting that.
Yeah.
You're willing to drive 40, 60, 80 miles an hour down a 2-lane road, and you trust that everybody else is being reasonable. Now, I know we all have that bias that, well, but I'm the best driver out there on the roads, bar none. But still, the default moral condition of the average man or woman is not 0.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when I talked about benevolence online, I'll try to wrap up with this. A lot of people right away said, well, but some people are terrible. A lot of people are terrible. Look at our culture. And besides, it would be irrational to judge somebody in a positive light before you know anything about them, because they have free will. That is a rationalistic argument. I don't mean to criticize the people who offered that to me, because every element of what I just said is absolutely true. And yet, observe in the world that that's not the way the world works at all. And there's a reason for that. And the reason is that on that scale of good, zero or flat, and evil, when you map that out onto reality, you have life, flat affect or ennui, and death or destruction. And most people out there are not destroying, not dying. Most people out there aren't even flat. Most people are out there living. Now, we know as objectivists, most of them aren't living the way they should. They aren't living as well as they could. Right. They aren't as consistently moral as they should be. Even those of us who know better are doing our best to try to be as consistently moral as we can be. I don't mean to be a Pollyanna, at least not in the irrational sense. And there's so much going on that's wrong in the world. I've listed it on previous shows. I'll bring it up on future shows. I'm not blind to any of that, any of the risks, any of what's going on in North Korea or China or the Middle East or Washington, D.C. The point is not that there's no evil in the world. But life is too short for that to matter much beyond what you've got to do to fight it. And the people who surround you, again, not just in your own family, your own friend circle, your own business associates, but all around you are too good for you to look out there and feel zero or less than zero. And more than that, as I say, we had this conversation online. And when I said that, a lot of people said, yeah, a lot of people suck, a lot of people are good, a lot of people this, a lot of people that, a lot of people. I said, this isn't about a lot of people. I mean, that matters, but that's the uninteresting half of this issue. The interesting half of it isn't what you're getting from other people. The interesting half of it is the part you control. The interesting half of it is, what's your stance? What's your decision about benevolence? What have you decided to project out to the world? What have you decided to be? As I've said before, it's not so much what the world throws at you, it's what you choose to do about it. When I think of benevolence, I don't think people are mean to me. I think, what am I being to the world, to my waitress, to my barista, to my family, to my wife, to you guys? And that's what I want for you. It's not about taking all the responsibility on your shoulders as a duty and, oh, I should let everybody crap all over me. It's about taking power. It's about asserting agency. It's about saying, this is the part of this I control. And if I do it right, it's going to affect everything else. I'll eventually find myself surrounded by better people. The better kinds of people will be drawn to me in the same way that I'm putting that out there. That sounds suspiciously like The Secret, but it's actually cause and effect. It's actually simple reality. To the extent you've done that, you already know it's true. You've already seen it happen in your own life. And if you haven't, take my word for it, give it a shot. Put your best out there. Don't accept anything less than the best from others, but expect it. Eventually, you're going to get it. It's not about what people are doing to you. It's about what you're doing.
You had a good formulation for that. How do you deserve to, or how do you deserve?
Yes, when we talked about justice, we took it a step beyond just give people what they deserve. Yes. You should give people what they deserve, but in life, you don't treat people the way they deserve to be treated. You treat them the way you deserve to treat them. Oh, what's the difference? Well, suppose, for example, you were on the hook to punish everybody who ever did you wrong. And suppose a lot of people did you wrong. Are you going to waste your precious time on that?
Right.
And assume, for example, they've done you wrong in ways that are more interpersonal, social, emotional. Are you going to spend the rest of your life being angry? Are you going to spend the rest of your life carrying that chip on your shoulder? Are you going to give them that much power over you? we did a whole episode called Let It Go, and it was not about forgiving people. I never forgive people. I don't really forget either.
Yeah.
But what I do is I don't care anymore. I put them in my rearview mirror.
Yeah.
I drive down the road. They're gone. I didn't have to punish them. I was discussing this with Razi earlier. You know, the biggest punishment I can do is they don't get me in their life anymore. They're now back there. But the point is, yeah, you want to be the driver, because your life, you're the star.
Right.
You are the star of this life, and you are the director, and you are the producer, and you are writing this script on the fly. In fact, that's one of the things I recommend, is that you actually spend more time writing the script. Don't let it all be impromptu.
Right.
Don't let it all be improv. Design your life. But yes, thank you for mentioning that. You're driving this bus, and you get to decide how much benevolence is in your life. Not just in terms of the people you choose to have in your life, although you should be choosing the benevolent ones, but in terms of how much you're bringing to the table.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not about, I'm going to be really benevolent and give out lots of stuff and be really altruistic and sacrifice. It's about
random acts of kindness.
Acts of kindness.
Silly.
God. They might as well have just said irrational acts of kindness. I like acts of kindness. I like charity. I like generosity. But that's secondary. The real point is that in order to be just, you mustn't sacrifice. And just like in the case of somebody does you wrong and now you have to hunt them down. No, you're not on the hook for that. That would be injustice. That would be unjust. What you've earned, what you deserve, is the rewards of all of your virtues. Not to have to put on the role of the world's or morality's policeman. Spend the rest of your life being angry and bitter and hunting down everybody who ever did anything wrong. Your life is too short for that. You are too valuable for that. So we have a question.
Oh, we actually, it's more of a statement, kind of a personal statement, so I'm not entirely sure if I should be reading it. Mr. Spoke, if you'd like to go ahead and if you'd like us to read it, we can do that. But we have a $10 super chat, and he is talking about somebody whom I don't know. So
hey, I have INTJ Island. I assume that's a program or a website or a podcast or a channel, who has spoke glowingly of Ayn Rand in her novels, is, quote, grieving the loss of a spouse, unquote. For you, my boundless gratitude, and for him, my deep sympathy. So it's an expression of sympathy. Yeah,
okay.
We've had a couple of passings recently, and this might be related to one of them.
Yes, but it's a bit of a puzzle, but thank you so very much.
Yes,
we really appreciate the $10 super chat.
No, he explains, he's on YouTube. So yes, we do send our sympathies, and as I always say to the remaining spouse, may your heartbreak be short and your memories be long. It's very sad the older I get to see more and more, but the only consolation is that the heartbreak is a sign of the deep values that were held.
That's right.
So
grief is love persevering, as that one show said.
Grief is love persevering.
A WandaVision. Yes.
Well, that's true. That's pretty damn good for a television show.
Yeah, it's not bad. Not bad at all.
Yes. So I encourage people, when they encounter the word benevolence, if you feel suspicious about that, certainly keep an eye out for the altruist, keep an eye out for the benevolence trap. But life is too short to be angry, to be bitter, or even just to be cold and to be flat.
Or to be suspicious.
If you think the average person is rotten, you might need to change your media consumption. I recommend no more than an hour a day of television news and or online news, because the whole point of news isn't news if nothing goes wrong. Well, occasionally you get a few triumphs out there, like the recent triumph of Boom Aeronautics. They're now selling 15 supersonic airplanes to United by the end of this decade. But mostly, news is news because something went wrong. News is news because something had to be done about it. News is news because somebody did something bad. And if you spend enough time watching news, you can convince yourself, yeah, most people suck. The world is going to hell in a handbasket and it's all over. And maybe it's because I've been in the objectivist community so long. I've seen the end of the world so many times. I've seen the collapse of the U.S. economy so many times, the collapse of the U.S. dollar. Yeah. I've seen the complete moral collapse of the country. I've seen the destruction of the Democratic Party. I've seen
many
the
civil wars.
Destruction of the Republican Party. I've never seen a civil war, but I've heard announcements of the upcoming second civil war, right. The so-called Boogaloo. But 10 years before this, it was called something else, and it was going to take an entirely different form. Those things could happen. Not likely. Right. Given the evidence, given the actual real world out there. Mm-hmm. So anyway, get away from those television news programs. An hour a day is plenty to stay in touch with what's going on out there. Give you all the information you need to do what I do, which is write to your governor, write to your politicians, send money to the organizations that are fighting in your name, support individuals, because there are people who love this stuff, and I don't mean to criticize people who like politics or like the fight, like the fray. If you're, Jason Crawford or Alex Epstein or intellectuals like Yaron Brook and Harry Binswanger, and if that's your thing, if that's how you make your living, great. I just see a lot of people make themselves miserable over that stuff, and again, there's no good reason for it. We are living in the best times ever. Bottom line. Yep. Our cities are amazing. Yeah. Our technologies are amazing. Our level of prosperity. Look at the levels of poverty on the decline. Look at lifespans. Look at average health. Look at every metric. Mm-hmm. The only one that took a decline in the last couple of years, which is a cultural thing, was deaths of despair. We did see an uptick in suicides. Look at rates of crime, look at rates of violence. You occasionally see a spike and everybody's like, oh, murder went up, because it's gone down for the last 25 years. We have never lived in better times. Yeah. That will be a whole separate show. Point is, there is every reason to decide, I'm going to put some goodwill out there. I'm going to establish good intent. I'm going to change my default to being in a bad mood to try to put a little more good stuff out there. Or in my case, I'm going to take it from putting a little good stuff out there. I'm going to try to put a lot more good stuff out there. Life is I won't even say it's too short. I'll just say life is finite. Too short, too long doesn't even make any sense, but it is too precious. Yeah. Yeah. As the great Chris Squire of the band Yes said before he passed away, any day that you've lost is one more that you won't get back. Mm. You can say that in 1,000 different ways, and they're all true. And I like things that are all true, but I'm not an altruist.
Ism at the end.
That's right. As long as there's no ism at the end, it's all good. When I gave this topic a run through a year ago, I actually had homework. These are my notes from that episode. So my homework for the show was improve the situation. For all I've said, we could and should be far better. So included in my homework was this. Listen to Tara Smith's outstanding lecture, Sport as an Arena for Admiration. And I'll quote a bit of that. As a domain of human activity, sport offers a great deal of healthy modeling. To appreciate the value of this realm that regularly offers admirable displays, we need only contrast prevalent attitudes in the world around us. Again, this is still quoting Tara Smith. In our society, God, this hit me hard. In our society, the vogue is a rather dim view of one's fellow men. Polls report abysmal levels of trust and respect for political leaders, for courts, the military, the media, universities, religious institutions. Individuals' views of one another have become increasingly caustic. They seem to range between suspicious and hostile. And she quotes from the New York Times. Commentators describe ours as a cynical age, as if stating the self-evident, Bad faith is a given. And then she goes on. Both of these lines from the New York Times.
Sorry about that. That was my toe.
Both of these lines from the New York Times, just again stated as matter of fact.
Mm-hmm.
I posted a link to that lecture, and you can find it just by searching YouTube in the show notes. Tara Smith, Sport as an Arena for Admiration. And everything she says about this is true. Our modern cynical age, our age of dark humor and snark and cynicism and distrust, and all of it is wholly unnecessary. So your assignment, if you want to join me in the homework, is to remind yourself that you know better, that we live in a civilized, relatively free, enormously productive division of labor society in which most of the people with whom you interact can be trusted to provide value for value, at least to the extent that you deal with them. And more, in most of them, you can find genuine goodwill and benevolence, even if it takes a bit of digging sometimes to find it. So your homework is to be awesome and see the awesome.
Assume positive intent in other people, perhaps?
We are surrounded by miracles, not least of which is ourselves. So thank you so much for that. We're going to wrap up, and what we're going to do is we're going to go over to Clubhouse. We're going to continue the conversation on the audio-only platform. And let's see if, oh, that's right, I've already scheduled it. So we will fire that up. Join us on Clubhouse. At that point, you can actually get on a microphone, talk back. You don't have to spend any money on Super Chat to do it. Although, again, I thank you very much for those who have supported the Ayn Rand Center UK with your Super Chats. And we will see you in a moment. Thank you.